Today, everyone, we are going to explore values-based and impact-driven investing. Here in Ontario and across Canada, regulations and investment structures often prevent Canadians from putting their money to work in local opportunities. Instead, much of our capital flows out of our communities and into distant stock markets and corporations. And the outcome, our investments
We should find
help
out
create.
what's the number 30.
So the outcome of this, our investments help create jobs and wealth elsewhere, where the communities where we live, work, and raise our families remain underfunded. And ironically, business development, research, and economic development organizations consistently report access to capital as one of the greatest barriers to launching, growing, or transitioning businesses. And this includes cooperatives. So today's webinar will introduce us to two cooperatives that will show us how we can strengthen our communities while also providing some benefits to ourselves, creating opportunities for us to invest in projects that matter to us in our communities while building our own portfolios. So let's start off with a land acknowledgement. So please join me in acknowledging that the land where I live and work is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee. This territory is covered by the Williams and Upper Canada Treaties. Let us all recognize the deep connections Indigenous peoples have to this land and acknowledge our responsibility to work towards reconciliation and justice in all aspects of care and community building. A quick agenda for today. We're going to start by hearing a little bit more from Chris and Sean about their respective cooperatives and about themselves and their journey as well. And then next we'll move into a facilitated question and answer period with Chris and Sean. I have some questions that we're going to ask them to help us understand a little bit more about the work that they do. And then we'll make sure to leave some time at the end for audience questions. Few housekeeping notes for us. So this session is being recorded and it will be shared on our YouTube channel. So as we go through, we're going to hold our questions until the audience question portion of the webinar. But if you have questions come to mind as we go through the discussion, please feel free to add them in the chat. And then that way we've got a little parking lot for them, and then we can come back to them during the audience question portion. And if you have any technical difficulties or you need help, please let us know in the chat and I'll do my best to assist you. So today we are joined, I'm so thrilled that they're both here today. So we have Chris Caners from, he's the general manager from SolarShare. Chris is a proud father and enthusiastic cyclist who resides with his family on Treaty 13 territory in Toronto. Chris advocates for the distribution of energy, wealth, and governance. It is his privilege to be the general manager of SolarShare, a cooperative that owns, operates, and finances solar energy projects in Ontario. And also joining us today is Sean Campbell. He's the executive director of Union Sustainable Development Cooperative, which builds and buys affordable apartments in Waterloo Region. He's the principal of Scaled Purpose, a management consultancy that works with governments, nonprofits, cooperatives, and social enterprises on projects that make their community a better place to live. Sean is an instructor at Wilfrid Laurier University and a director at the Canadian Cooperative Investment Fund. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Chris and then followed by Sean to tell us more about their co-ops and the work that they do. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will turn it over to Chris.
Thanks so much, Michelle. It's great to be here, and thanks everyone for joining us for this session. Thanks to the Ontario Cooperative Association and Michelle for putting it on. Also, thanks to Sean for participating in this. I'm always excited to hear what Sean has to say, so I'm looking forward to that myself. So I thought Michelle referenced, our journeys to cooperatives and to the work that we're doing. And that's great because I thought I'd start with that a little bit and lead you into, why it's my privilege to work for SolarShare, and why I'm personally invested. I'm a member of SolarShare as well. And so um, my mom was telling me a story the other day about when my brother was being born. And so I went to a neighbor's house and they had one of those old screen doors and there were some kids playing outside and they weren't getting along. And the way that my mom tells it is I was yelling through the door at the kids who were fighting to cooperate. And so I think I came to cooperation relatively early on in my life for whatever reason, but I love cooperation and I love cooperatives because they're built for people and they're built for humans, and that's part of their purpose. And I love the democratic nature of cooperatives. So I've always been really interested in cooperation and working together with our fellow humans to achieve things that we need as humans. And so the other thing that, one of the things I came through engineering education, and part of that I kind of fell into energy, as it were. I had an opportunity to do an internship at a research center that was looking at fuel cells back in the day, and that sort of led to more of an interest around energy for me. And because energy is closely related with climate, I started to develop an interest in climate as well, and wanting to try and help address that situation. One of the key things that happened for me, I had the privilege of living in Kenya for a couple of years. My wife was doing her PhD research in Kenya, and so I went with her. And I was fortunate to work with a company called M-Kopa, and M-Kopa means mobile, M for mobile, Kopa for lending in Kiswahili. And the brilliance of this, what M-Kopa did was they had a small solar panel with a battery and some LED lights and some cell phone chargers. And now this device was very expensive for ordinary Kenyans. So they couldn't just buy it off the shelf. And so what ended up happening, what the brilliant thing about M-Kopa is what they did is they allowed people to finance it over time. And they did that by leveraging the existing very sophisticated mobile banking system that Kenya had in place at the time called M-Pesa, which is still there. And so basically, a Kenyan was able to finance it through their cell phone, if finance this purchase of this solar panel and battery over time. And cash flow is a big issue for lots of Kenyans. And so if they had 50 cents that day, they could pay it through their mobile phone. The device would work. The next day, if they didn't have that money, it wouldn't work. But over time, the idea is they paid it off and they were able to use this device and own it outright. And this displaced the use of kerosene, which has indoor air quality issues and obviously is costly as well. So it's cheaper than doing that. And you didn't have to walk to the local store to get the kerosene. So that was a really amazing moment for me because I started to understand the power of finance and money in terms of making life better for folks. And the other thing I realized was that solar is amazing. This is not something that has this is something that has come along quite quickly over the last 15 or 20 years. When we started putting solar in, the cost was very, very high. And now the cost has dropped precipitously, and it's now the lowest cost form of new generation globally in Ontario and other places. So it's pretty incredible what's happened in solar. And the thing I love about solar is that you can literally put it anywhere. So all of that together, when I saw an opportunity to work with SolarShare, I thought, okay, this is great. It's a cooperative. It has that democratic edge. It's about humans. It has the energy aspect. We have this renewables bit and the solar bit where we can put it anywhere and anyone can generate their own electricity. That's fantastic. And it also involves finance, and not only finance, but this community finance where people are getting together in the community to support this effort and support this cooperative. So I really liked all of that sort of stuff, and moving money towards distributed clean energy and democratic governance seemed like a really worthy thing to spend my time on. The other thing is that, like Michelle said, we're keeping that economic activity in Ontario. We're keeping the jobs and the money in our province, and that's really awesome because we're financing it ourselves. So that's why I feel very privileged and fortunate to be the general manager of SolarShare. So SolarShare Cooperative We are a renewable energy cooperative founded in 2010. So it's been 15 years that we've been around. And what we do is we own, operate, and finance solar projects across Ontario. So we own 51 solar projects. They are all the way from up near Arnprior and then up to Temiskaming, Ottawa, Kingston area, GTHA, up all the way to Manitoulin Island. So we're quite well distributed across the province with members across the province. We generate our capacity is about 15 megawatts of solar. We generate about 17 million kilowatt hours per year of electricity, which is about enough to power 1,800 homes in the province. The way that our cooperative works is we have contracts with basically with the provincial government to sell the power, those kilowatt hours that we generate to the government for the benefit of all Ontarians. And that's helpful for us because it's a fixed rate contract, so we know exactly how much we're going to make based on the number of kilowatt hours we generate. We have financing in a couple of ways, actually. One way we do financing is through commercial debt. And the reason I mentioned this is because we're just like any other business. We get commercial debt where necessary. And what we had to do to go through that process is we had to go through a lot of due diligence, lots of lawyers, lots of engineers coming and looking at our projects, making sure that we were creditworthy. And so we have those agreements ongoing. The way we do most of our finance for SolarShare is through what we call solar bonds. And these are community bonds that we raise from retail investors like you across Ontario. And so we have about 2,200 members who have invested in SolarShare over that time. And we've raised about $90 million since 2010 using that mechanism. So and the way that this happens is we're regulated by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, and we issue an offering statement. It's kind of like a prospectus. It has all the information that you'd want to know about SolarShare. And you can see all of our pro forma statements and all of the different types of equipment we have, et cetera. And so that's how we issue this offering statement, and then any resident of Ontario can purchase a solar bond. So we offer a range of different types of solar bonds when we're on sale. We're sort of in between offering statements at the moment. But when we are on sale, we ask for a minimum investment of $1,000. We want to keep that as accessible as possible. And we offer different terms and rates depending on our needs at the time. But any resident of Ontario is able to invest in SolarShare. So I'm excited to talk to you more about SolarShare and the work that we do. And so I'm looking forward to answering any questions you have.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chris. I loved hearing more about your journey. There's all these things I didn't know, and I'm excited to learn more about SolarShare. I see your passion for cooperatives and the co-op movement, so I understand that a little bit more now. So that was great. Thank you. Thank you. And now, Sean, we'll turn it over to you and hear a little bit more about you.
Thanks, Michelle. And Chris, thanks so much for sharing all that. I really want to go for a bike ride with you so we can learn more about each other's co-ops. That's awesome. So I'm based in Kitchener-Waterloo. I'm a lifelong resident here, and it's been really exciting over the last few years to see our community grow up. We're welcoming more and more people from around the country and around the world who are choosing to make Waterloo their home, and that's really special. In the process, some of the changes happening in our community haven't been working the same for everybody. And we see both newcomers and longstanding residents being priced out of our community, having a hard time finding affordable, adequate places to live that are comfortable and help meet their own personal life objectives. And we started looking around as a community to see, well, what could we do about it? And we were inspired by community investment cooperatives out in Alberta, the Sangudo Opportunity Development Cooperative. In Sangudo, they were experiencing what a lot of small towns experience of young people would move away for school and then they'd come back at the holidays, but that's it because they couldn't find any employment, any homes in their hometown. And the crisis point for this community was when the meat packing plant was closing up. The gentleman who owned the factory couldn't find anyone who wanted to buy an old rural Albertan meat packing plant. But this was a challenge for the community because it provided a lot of great jobs. one more strike against the community, one more challenge for getting their young folks to stay in town. And it was relied upon by farmers in the area. They'd have to ship their cattle further away. So, inspired by the great agricultural co-op tradition of Western Canada, they created the Sangudo Opportunity Development Cooperative. Folks in the area purchased shares in the cooperative. They bought the business by giving a long-term low-interest loan to two young men who had been working in the factory and had that knowledge of how to run it. And all these years later, it's still going strong. They've used that same model in order to create coffee shops and single-family homes in this small town. So that's where our very wordy name of Union Sustainable Development Cooperative comes from, is inspired by Sangudo Opportunity Development Cooperative. And we saw that model spread across Alberta and BC. Going south of the border in Minneapolis, we saw the Northeast Investment Cooperative. This is a community in Minneapolis, an area that was underinvested in and was facing gentrification. They were excited to see the changes in their community, but they wanted to make sure that it was going to work for them, for their neighbors, and it was going to be owned and controlled, benefited by the people who have stuck it out and lived there all those years. So, inspired by the small farming town of Sangudo, Alberta, the folks in Minneapolis created the Northeast Investment Co-op. They raised funds from their community members. They bought this commercial building, fixed it up, and inside the building now is the state's very first worker co-op brewery, brew pub. And since then, actually, they've inspired a second co-op brew pub in town. There's a bike shop. So Chris and I would have a fun time there, and a German-style bakery. And Kitchener, where I live, used to be called Berlin. I love bicycles. My partner runs a worker co-op brewery here in Kitchener called TWB. So it checks so many boxes. Like, how cool is this? The community came together. They identified a problem. They solved it using their own money, and all this cool stuff that's popping up. And I actually had the opportunity to go on a road trip there about 2 years ago, and it was really fun, really special. So Northeast Investment Co-op, which was inspired by Sangudo, then inspired the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative in Oakland, a Black-led organization also pushing back against rising rents and gentrification, purchasing both residential and commercial properties. So this was the first time that we saw the leap over to residential properties, again using the co-op model to raise capital from their community, from their neighbors, in order to buy existing buildings and keep it permanently affordable in community ownership. So, seeing Oakland inspired by Minneapolis, inspired by Sangudo, which, if we go back further, was inspired by Nova Scotia and their community economic development and investment funds, we came full circle and said, well, why hasn't anyone done this in Ontario? Chris and his renewable energy co-op friends are doing a great job raising money for wind and solar. How do we do this for housing? And so we started Union Cooperative to do just that. And it took us some time to, figure out the best way forward. We were community folks. We had no real experience in multi-residential housing or commercial real estate. We had never done a community bond or a raise before. So we had a lot of learning to do. We wrote our first business plan in 2017, incorporated in 2018, went through that same offering statement process that Chris mentioned in 2021, and completed our first raise during COVID with a lot of Zoom screens. And actually, at least two of our members are on our this call here today, which is really lovely. So we were successful in that raise. We brought in about $7 million, both from community members and charitable foundations, and we were able to purchase 60 two-bedroom apartments in Kitchener. This building was built back in the 1960s. It has long-term tenants and low rents. Doesn't have, stainless steel and granite top. It has, low rents. Actually, it does have stainless steel appliances, but these are the types of apartments that are being purchased by big investors. You can either flip the tenants out using a rent eviction, or you just wait them out. You can really quickly drive up your return. But they're often much more affordable than the broader market, and sometimes even more affordable than new affordable housing properties. So we really have to try and preserve these. So we were fortunate that we were able to find this property, and it has since helped us get involved in different affordable housing partnerships, including Build Now Waterloo Region, which is led by our local Habitat. Just received 25 acres of land from the city of Waterloo in order to build 1,000 new homes. Two of the buildings will be owned and operated by an affiliate of Union Cooperative, Union Community Housing, with 100 and 170 new apartments, including ground floor commercial, where we'll not be charging any rent to the small businesses, social enterprises, nonprofits, or hopefully co-ops that will be our commercial tenants in this space. So we get to try and change the dynamic or the thinking around affordable housing to not, those folks are over there bringing down my property values. By the way, all the research shows that doesn't happen. But now we actually get to create a really cool, compelling space that the small businesses that we all love and rely upon in our community can thrive because they're not paying rent and they have a supportive community landlord. That our 250 members, we've got some catching up to do on Chris. Our 250 members, they do well when these commercial tenants do well as well. So it creates this closed loop of support. So we still have a lot of learning to do, a lot of growth to do. We've just completed the one raise, but we're starting to plan out our next capital campaign with the hope of continuing to grow.
Wow, thank you so much, Sean. That is so exciting. And I love seeing like, this that when you talk about like Nova Scotia to Sangudo to Minneapolis to Oakland, like this is why we are here today. This is why we do the work that we do, right? To share that message and inspire people and let them know, there's another way out there that we can do this. So that's fantastic to hear. And this new project sounds incredible. I'm so excited.
Well,
Uh,
thanks so much, Michelle. And yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think one of the really special things about community organizations and enterprise generally, but the co-op community really specifically, is we often do think of ourselves as the co-op movement, and there's a real supportive culture between co-ops. Whether it's agricultural cooperatives doing work that is completely outside of my area of knowledge, that are sharing their documents with us to help inform the work that we're doing, or the cooperators as a leader in the insurance sector sponsoring Ontario co-op events so that we can all have these shared learning experiences. There's a real kind of camaraderie and support because, of course, co-ops support co-ops, and we can all grow together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. So thank you so much for sharing. So, okay, so I have a couple questions, a couple things that um I was hoping to talk about today. So, first of all, we hear a lot now, or are starting to hear a lot more about ethical investing. So, my question to both of you, and maybe Sean, you want to start us off, and then we'll hear from Chris. What does ethical investing mean to you? How does that work in the cooperative context? And how can co-ops really support that vision?
Yeah, and co-ops have been doing this since before it was cool. You know, Gailey, if you've ever had Ivanhoe cheese or Gailey butter, you've had cooperative manufactured dairy products, and they've been completing raises for decades. They incorporated in the 60s. I don't know if the raises go back that far, but certainly, 20, 30 years at least. And so long before community bonds and that language being used, the co-op sector was already doing this work. Um, so I think, if we think of morality as kind of individual and ethic as a system, the nice thing with the co-op model is it creates that ethical investing framework. So co-ops are required to operate close to break even, so we're not extracting more than we need to in terms of profit. It's one member, one vote, so it incorporates democracy within the investment process because we're typically selling our shares or bond to our members. There's that direct opportunity for members to learn about what we're doing, influence the direction, and enforce their rights as investors as well. But broadly, when we look at what co-ops have been used for from an investment perspective in Ontario, we're seeing renewable energy, we're seeing farmer-owned businesses that take care of our agricultural systems and processes while also protecting their livelihoods as well. We're seeing housing and a few other niche spaces as well. But we are seeing co-ops being intentionally formed by community to address community challenges, and I think that's a really special tool for co-ops as we continue to grow and hopefully see more replication across Ontario.
Well said, Sean. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. No, I love what you're saying, Sean. And I think picking up on what you were saying about cooperatives are about people forming cooperatives where there's a need. And I think that's one of the fundamental things about cooperatives is that when people can come together to support the needs of the community where that's not already happening. So in Sean's example with, housing, a perfect example of that, get together to support local housing, local affordable housing, because that's as we all know, we have a problem with that in our country. Same thing, it reminds me of like a cooperative grocery store. Like there's and the company store, as it were. Like those are different things. And if we do it for ourselves, then we don't have, again, what Sean was referring to, that extractive process. And what we're trying not to be extractive. I think a lot of the system that we've developed outside of cooperatives puts capital as the most important thing. And so that capital is looking to generate more capital, generate returns. And the way we do that is by squeezing those out of whatever it is. So if it's an affordable housing, well, we can jack that up and put granite countertops and try and sell that and raise our rents and get people rent evicted, et cetera. So there's that extraction that's happening, and cooperatives are not designed for that. That's not what they're supposed to do. And that's because they're controlled democratically. And I think that brings us around to the ethical investing, the human-centered idea around cooperatives. And I was thinking about this question last night and thinking about ethics is, I'm not an ethicist or anything like that, and I was thinking about ethics as being like, do we do less no harm, or doing good, or are we celebrating life, or supporting life, is kind of what I was going with. And I was looking around on the internet, as one does, and it said, and one of the answers for ethics was pertaining or dealing with morals or the principles of morality. And I was like, okay, well, how about morals? And I found, I kid you not, on a business school website, I found this: morals are the prevailing standards of behavior that enable people to live cooperatively in groups. Um, Amazing. So that seems to sum it up. There we go. The cooperative, living cooperatively in groups, and ethical investing, I think, are well tied together. So, the cooperative mindset towards humans, centering humans, rather than that extractive capital process, and being in the community, being democratically run, I think all speak to me as ethical investing values, and why cooperatives are well placed to support those kinds of opportunities.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a great quote. I wish business schools kind of maybe focus a little more on morals and the cooperative business model. It's kind of ironic. So I think you both explained really well how, the co-op model more broadly supports kind of ethical investment. Um, so maybe you can speak a little bit more, to your specific co-op. So if I'm a member of your co-op, and so I'm an investor, how is that helping me to invest my money ethically? Like, how am I helping my community? What am I contributing by investing in your cooperative as a member? Chris, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, so the process, a little bit about the process. So we have these offering statements. They're similar to a prospectus. It basically includes all the information you'd want to know about our cooperative and what we do, how we operate, how we generate revenues. And remember, the way that we generate revenue is through selling electricity effectively to the government over a long period of time from the solar projects that we own collectively as a cooperative. And so that offering statement is receipted by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. We have a minimum investment of $1,000 and a lifetime membership fee of $40. So you're able to, as a member, invest as much as you'd like over time, but so long as it's a minimum of $1,000 in that case, but you don't have to pay the membership fee again. Um, and what happens is, so the way that we work, we've basically raised the money that we needed to install the projects over time. The projects that we have were built between 2011 and 2018 or so. And so the money that we've raised over time goes to support the capital costs of those projects. And then we have these solar bonds that continuously sort of mature over time. So the solar bonds have different terms. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years or 5 years, whatever it might be. And those mature over time. And then members can choose to take that money back, or they can choose to reinvest that money. into the future or add more money as they choose. And through that, so we have this constantly rolling sort of maturity schedule and sales cycle, so that over time we've sold all these bonds by refinancing the bonds that are maturing as well over time. So typically, we're often open for sale and for new membership. We expect that to happen for us a little bit later this year. In terms of the where the money goes, so this money goes to support the financial operation of SolarShare. We manage our own cash flow and make sure that we have enough money on hand to pay out those members who want to have their money back, as well as new capital investment. So we continue to push that forward, and over time we reduce our balance outstanding to our members as we generate more revenue every year. So the other thing about cooperatives is there's no real, the thing I like too is that there's not this profit motive. Like, no one's going to get the profit at the end of if we do our jobs well and have this, this amount of money. What we're trying to do is balance returning money to our members, as well as having money to do other things that support the ecosystem. So stuff like this, where we want to see more cooperatives, we want to support the cooperative ecosystem, we want to support the renewable energy ecosystem in Ontario, and we want to see more distributed solar energy. We want to support the education of our members through electrifying their homes or understanding more about solar energy. So in fact, I should mention we have a community energy day that's happening on September 20th here in Toronto, down at Exhibition Place. You're all welcome to join us. It's free, and we'll talk about the wind turbine that's down at Exhibition Place, et cetera. So those are the kinds of things we want to be doing to try and push forward more of this democratization, more of this cooperative work, more of this renewable energy in our province.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for that explanation. Sean, do you have anything to add for this? And like understanding, I guess, as a member, I'm not going to install a solar panel on my roof necessarily. I'm not getting that if I invest in SolarShare. If I invest in Union, I might not need a affordable housing, or I might not. That doesn't mean I can live there. But how is that helping my community? How is my investment contributing?
We would not have been able to purchase our 58 units without member investments. Full stop, would not have happened. There is no current government money available to buy existing apartments with long-term tenants and low rents. The other top bid that we know was received by the seller was a real estate investment trust with the stated purpose in their investor documents of seeking tenant turnover and raising the rent so they can drive returns. I don't know how many of our residents would be out of a home right now or in a different position, but certainly, that's a huge opportunity. We have had the opportunity to raise rents above the provincial guideline. We have never done that. We have never evicted anybody. We have supported our tenants in order to access financial supports and rent supplements from the municipality, including the Ontario Energy Benefit provincially. That's stuff that a normal landlord doesn't do. But all this is possible because we had 250 people who were as, weird as us, who were like, yeah, we can do this. And when we did our raise, we had never done this before. We couldn't point to anyone in Ontario who had done this before, and we didn't have a property picked out. And we still managed to get 250 people who all decided that, yep, we're willing to take a chance on this. And, I love Water the Region, but that made my heart swell. Like, just thinking about how many people wanted to put their money where their hearts are, that we often think of financial decisions with one side of our brain and, the causes and the people we care about with another. It doesn't have to be that way. In Water the Region, in 2020, the most recent data that I was able to find, residents of Water the Region contributed $830 million to our RRSPs alone. Not TFSAs, money on the mattress, stock market, just our RSPs. If we could keep even half of 1% of that in our community each year, we could start buying up this whole town and just control it for community benefit. And so that's something else that's really special about co-ops is we're able, and not all co-ops do this, and there's some challenges around it as well. But with our great friends at the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation and their RRSP program, folks can actually move over their investments from, one of the big banks or even a credit union where, it's invested in the stock market in a way that's not necessarily feeling aligned with their values. Like if you look at what is in your stock portfolio, there's probably some stuff in there that would make you a little uncomfortable. And here we're able to move it into the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation, which is managed, the fund itself is managed through this co-op financial institution, Concentra Trust. And then you can invest money with your RSP into the co-op. And this we found was helpful for folks who say have an employer matching RSP, who are a bit younger, who have years away from retirement. And, we have a few folks who said, I have young kids. I just bought a house. It'd be tough for me to make a $10,000 investment out of my savings or my income from this year, but I know I'm not going to touch my RSPs for the next 20, 25 years. So I'm okay making that investment there. It's not money I'm currently using for another opportunity. And, that was really important too. And so for co-ops, we have a little more flexibility in how we're able to raise money from the general public through RSPs than other types of businesses or nonprofits. And that's a really special tool that we have available and that we need to, as a sector, kind of continue to build on. But I just keep going back to that number, $830 million contribution in one single year. Let's keep at least 8 million of that here in our community, helping our neighbors, where you can see the investment. You can walk to the address where your money is, and you can see the impact you're having.
That's incredible. That is an incredible number. Um, and again, like I think it's just so important that people realize the potential here and realize that there's other options out there for where they want to invest their money. Um, wow, that is incredible. Um, so, Chris, you talked a little bit about it, and we can see in the work you're doing, Sean, as well, that really the purpose really behind cooperatives is not just to drive profit, right? It's not profit at the expense of everything else. So how do you, as organizations, balance that, tightrope between profit and social impact? Um, how do you measure your success beyond just profit? I mean, you talked about that a little bit, Sean. Um, right, with the impact that you're having in your community, but how do you organizationally kind of, create that balance between social and financial impact?
I, to go back to a point Chris mentioned earlier, I think a really key feature of the co-op model that helps that balance is democracy. And the fact that we have a broad range of community members investing. The most anyone has invested in our co-op is $10,000. So, is this going to make or break you? I mean, if it is, we very much steer your way. Do not invest in the co-op. There's lots of other ways to support affordable housing. But for folks who are choosing to invest $10,000, whether they earn a 3% return or a 6% return, that's not material to their lives. And so as a sector, we do have to make sure that we're recognizing that folks are making a choice to invest and that we do have to honor that commitment and pay a return. It's still cheaper for us and more flexible than going to a bank. A bank's going to charge more and ask a heck of a lot more of us than our members will. But it takes away some of that extractive pressure that if it's one person who has all of their money in this building, that starts to be a really meaningful amount of money coming out of the building and in their profits, their dividends. But for us, we're distributing that across 200 people. So I think that in and of itself is a counter pressure to the pressure of driving up revenues too much. But I also don't think it's necessarily bad for some co-op models to try and make as much money as they can. When you think of a worker co-op that is manufacturing stuff and selling it to people who really enjoy what they do, if they're charging a fair rate and people want to buy it, that's great. It's worker owned. It's going back to the workers. In our case, we're affordable housing, so that's a little bit of a different story. And we have our own goals in terms of what affordability means. We also have a lot of government contracts and mortgages that say we can't charge more than a certain amount. And that's certainly a pretty heavy incentive to not charge too much because we're not allowed to. We also have an internal policy that we will not pay dividends in excess of prime plus 3%. And I think we may actually just fix that at either 5 or 6% to make it a little more clear. But that helps as well. So let's, just set the expectation of this is why we're doing this. Financial return is certainly important. And if we want to grow as a sector, we need to be able to provide a financial return. Certain people, if you're planning for your retirement or you're investing as a foundation or an institution, like you have certain financial goals and we have to honor that. But we're also providing social returns. We're helping folks know that they're contributing to their community, that they can see the impact that they're having and can tell that story, whether it's to their stakeholders or to their families and themselves, and know that they're helping make a difference.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. And, or sorry, Sean and Chris, do you have anything to add to that? How do you kind of, again, balance that social and environmental or social impact goals, and communicate that as well to your members in your communities?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I liked what Sean was saying a lot in terms of a few different things there. I think, about the registered accounts, that is a crazy numbers. And when you think about all that capital flowing probably out of Ontario, and all of that capital going to things that we don't have any connection to, that's really striking. And I think being able to see and touch the stuff that we're all investing in together is very valuable. It bridges that gap between the idea of, we're doing this to make a profit, and that's the number one thing. We don't really see what's happening on the other side to, hey, look, we're doing good work and we're still making a profit, and we're making a reasonable return. And I think that's the language I like to use. I think about a reasonable return on our capital. And we want to avoid that extractive mindset. And we're sort of similar to Union in that we're a tax exempt or nonprofit cooperative. So we're not trying to maximize the amount of money we have at the end. And even if we did have money at the end in the future, what we're going to do is put that back into more supporting renewable energy in Ontario. So for us, it's not quite the same as a worker cooperative either. I agree with what Sean was saying. And I think it's not necessarily for every investor. Like if you are a person who has a fair amount of wealth, whether you get paid 3 or 6%, to Sean's point, isn't all that material. But the capital that we can use in this community, even a small amount of capital relative to the flows that are going elsewhere, can have a significant impact in the places that we live and work. So I think, balancing that financial return, we certainly see it when the market outside of SolarShare starts to, like it did in, I think, 2022, it started to go through the roof again. You could see that people were looking for higher returns because the inflation was going up, et cetera. And so we had to adjust according to that. But again, we're trying to hit an area where the returns are reasonable. You're doing work that you're being able to put money into activities that are in your own backyard, that are supporting social goals, environmental goals, like renewable energy, like education, like more cooperation in your communities than just through investing in the stock market.
Yeah, great information, Chris. And kind of to speak to that, so you talked a little bit about, and Sean did as well, about the rates of return and sort of the kind of investor that might be a good fit for a co-op. So maybe I could ask you and then Sean to speak a little bit more about that specifically. So who do you see as a good fit investor wise for your co-op? Who should be members? And what kind of due diligence should people be doing? What should people know before they invest in your co-op before they become a member?
Yeah, great. So I would say, who's a good fit. I wouldn't limit it necessarily. I think, like Sean, we're not interested in people putting all of their capital into SolarShare or any other thing. That's probably not a great strategy that I'd encourage. But we're a big tent. We want people who are aligned with our goals to come to SolarShare and be interested in investing with SolarShare, becoming a member, being part of our community. And I think that's that energy, that enthusiasm we can really harness to continue to do the work that we're doing. Equally for folks who are curious and, not really sure about the alignment, certainly we're a different beast. We are not that a common structure. And so it's understandable that people want to get to know us. And so even for folks who are not not totally sold on it, I encourage that, sign up for the newsletter and come to come to the AGM, check out the different events that we hold, because I think we want to bring those people along on the journey too. There's a lot, everyone can be involved in a cooperative. It's about the people in the community. It's about Ontarians, and that's what we want to be able to communicate. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at. So I wouldn't exclude anyone necessarily. We want people to be involved with that journey with us, and because we think we can help educate and bring them along. I think in terms of what you should do in terms of your own due diligence, read the offering statement, read the prospectus. That's the number one kind of thing. Check out our website. We have other information. For instance, at SolarShare, what we have is you can look at all of the solar projects that we own and operate, and you can see the real-time performance of those projects. And there's a bunch of other information available. I'd also encourage, what we find is that word of mouth is super helpful. And talk to your friend, talk to your family member who may have invested in SolarShare or another cooperative, like Union, and you can get some better sense of what it's like, and from someone that you trust. You're also welcome to. You can just call me. I'll happily talk your ear off about SolarShare and cooperatives because I love it so much. But that's what I'm here for. It is help educate and help our members and people who are interested in becoming members to know what it's like to be a member and invest in SolarShare.
Thanks, Chris. And when you say that, like, I know that you're genuine. Like, I think in the co-op sector, co-ops have an obligation to be more transparent, more accountable to their members. So we are a different business model in that way too, right? And I think people maybe aren't used to that. So I think that willingness, just to reach out, ask questions, look for those financials, look for that information. It's all available online, and to really explore that a little bit more and have those conversations. I think that's a really key takeaway. Sean, do you have anything to add?
Certainly, when we got started, we were hosting information nights twice a week, or information sessions every Wednesday and Saturday at noon. We were on a Zoom call for anyone who wanted to learn more and see the presentation. And that was a lot, but it was also, I think, a really helpful exercise for us to get direct feedback. Like, what are the questions people are asking? What are their concerns? Why are they making this choice to invest? But also to, I think, build that trust and put a face to a name. A lot of our early members were all people who, one of the founding members are a friend or family or colleague or somebody in that extended network. Again, that goes back to the trust piece. I remember when we started seeing more applications coming in with names that I didn't recognize. Like, this is like both a little scary, but also really cool. Like, now we're moving out beyond just the friends and family into folks, into the broader community who want to see this happen. And that's really special. I am really proud that we've also encouraged folks not to invest. So as we've gotten to know more about their financial situation, we've had a few folks say, I'm struggling with housing security myself, but I really want to support this. And be like, well, here are several other ways that you can support us, whether it's sharing with friends and family, different ways you can volunteer in the community. Let's not, we don't want anyone to be financially precarious because of this investment. I think sometimes the social piece draws them in. So, I think that's something that, really proud that we've kind of consistently done that. But for the most part, the folks that we see as investors, we do have a range of ages. We have a few undergrad students. We have the bulk of our members would probably be 45 plus, maybe even 50 plus. We typically have folks who are single family homeowners who, have themselves done well and want to be able to support others who are struggling with housing stability, and who may have a little more access to resources that they can make an investment like this. We know from their banking information that they're typically credit union members, but that's not exclusive either. So there are folks who are kind of already primed to think in this way as well. Now, hopefully we push beyond that, just like pushing beyond our friends and family network, pushing into like a broader investor network as well. But that makes sense, right? You start with the people you know, and then you start with the people who are like already committed to the same ideas and causes. We did a lot of sharing in newsletters of community organizations and presenting at different events. So also kind of then connecting with values-aligned organizations and their stakeholders was a key piece. And some of our members then came from those networks. I think another piece to consider too, if you are thinking about investing, it is particularly if you want to invest through the RSP or TFSA option, is there is an annual fee that you pay to the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation for having your self-directed RSP account. Currently, I believe it's $55 a year, but that's to open up an account. So if you do decide that you want to invest a little bit in, 3 or 4 different co-ops, you're just paying that one fee. So that can be a nice way to kind of test out co-ops too. Like it's a really good way to learn about different industries. Let's read the offering statement of a solar co-op, another one of a housing co-op, one of agricultural. Let's do it through our RSP option. Oh, the RSP also works for nonprofit bonds as well. Now I'm, making the best use of that fee. I'm learning a whole heck of a lot about social finance, about community finance, about the different sectors they're working in, and I can create my own little social purpose investment fund that I manage and control as well. So that's something to consider for folks who do want to use a registered account.
Perfect. Thank you. That's excellent information. And I think I appreciate both of you kind of speaking to the idea that, you know, cooperatives often face some extra barriers, right? Because there's a sort of a lack of knowledge out there. There's some myths and misconceptions, I think, around the co-op model. That's often a barrier that we need to overcome working in the sector. And I think, that idea that um, the the idea of promoting transparency and accountability with your members, of having those conversations and opening up those doors a little bit, starting to learn more about co-ops, and how you can invest ethically. Like, I think those are all really important ideas for people, because I know co-ops can be a little bit scary, right? People don't know a lot about them, and don't understand how, they think either they don't make money at all, or there's a lot of myths. So I think just the idea of having you both here talking about it, and then people understanding that might be here today, that you can actually reach out and have those conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I think there's, the best way to get started is to get started.
Yeah.
And if this is something that you know that you're interested and want to do, start small. If it's $1,000 and that's a good decision for you and your family financially, and you're comfortable with that decision and risk, like just give it a shot. You think of a SolarShare bond, you're looking at 3 to 5 years that your term is. So, not a long time. You get to try it out. Also thinking about other ways you can try cooperatives, whether it's going to the store and purchasing a product from Gay rather than making an investment in Gay which most of us can't do because we're not dairy farmers. The way that Gay can pay back their dairy farmer investments is when we buy Gay. So it creates this whole system approach and lets you start to think more about how these different pieces are connected. And certainly if you're someone in a position where you're interested in starting a co-op and helping to raise financing for your community, Chris and I are both total co-op geeks. And Chris, I think it's fair to speak for you as well that we're both happy to chat with anyone who is thinking about doing this for their co-op, for their community. Just get started. You'll learn along the way. And, we and others are here to help.
Thank you so much, Sean. And I appreciate you saying, kind of that last bit, because even at OCA, we've been talking to a lot of groups lately that really want to use a co-op model to create opportunities in their investment, or in their communities, right? To provide access to services, to provide opportunities for people in their community to grow their own wealth and prosper, by investing back into their communities. And there's some barriers and some hurdles that need to be overcome. And, following up on that, so how can we, the public, I guess, what can we do to support co-ops that want to provide more opportunities for local investment? Um, is there anything that we can do to help you and other co-ops continue to build these opportunities?
I mean, I think what Sean said, in terms of patronizing cooperatives is a great way of doing it. I think of, Gailey is a great example, looking for cooperative businesses to support in that way. Even if you're not investing, Home Hardware is another cooperative, for instance, using credit unions, for instance, which are also member owned. And I think building on what Sean was saying, I think and the sort of the idea of cooperatives being, we're all going to sit around and play our bongos and wear hemp pants, and that's how we roll, and we're all a bunch of volunteers. That's not how it has to work. That certainly can work like that, and I love those kinds of cooperatives as well. But you as a cooperative, you can hire professional managers like myself to do this kind of work, and we're professionally managed. It's like any other business. The difference is that we get to choose who runs that business as a democracy rather than who has the most money. You get to choose. No, it's actually based on one person, one vote. And I think that's fundamentally the difference. It doesn't mean that cooperatives are run on a volunteer kind of basis. That's not what it needs to be at all. I think that's really important. And also, being able to talk about cooperatives you're involved with. I personally just joined a food cooperative, a grocery cooperative that, I'm able to now participate. I just got a notice for their AGM. I can see how I can get involved with that cooperative and make choices that we're buying local food from local farmers and local producers to support our families and what we eat and how we do that. I think those are the kinds of ways in which, I guess there's two things there. One is the myths around cooperatives and how they're structured and how they must work and what they're used for. And the second thing is, patronizing cooperatives, telling your family about cooperatives, going to cooperative events. If you have the capital and you feel comfortable doing so, you can invest in a cooperative. And certainly the Ontario Cooperative Association is a great resource. If you're interested in learning about how to set up a cooperative, or you think that there's a need in your community that you've identified that needs to be filled, then a cooperative is a great way of doing it, and the OCA can help you. Like Sean said, I'm more than happy to talk to you. Please call me, and I will give you any information that I can about co-ops.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Sean, anything you want to add?
I see that we have at least two credit union leaders on the call here today, and I think that's a great example too of looking at your own organizations. Of are co-ops eligible to apply for any community grants that you have available, or is it just for nonprofits? Could co-ops be part of that too, where a credit union as a member-owned cooperative financial institution can support the growth of different types of co-ops? Are the underwriters at the credit unions trained to understand how co-op financial models and governance structures work so that they can support co-ops access bank capital as well? And I think many do, and that's great. But having those conversations as well. Maybe you work at a granting organization or a government. When you think of eligibility program for eligibility criteria for a certain program, is the word co-op on that list of eligible organization types. Thinking about those structural aspects too, in where you may have some influence or control. If you control some purchasing for your organization, and you have a social procurement policy, does it also prioritize cooperative organizations for any purchasing that your organization does? So as we start to build this cooperative economy that is member, community, worker, producer controlled and owned, that can't be outsourced, the head office can't be moved to a different country. The factory floor can't be stolen out from under the feet of the workers. These are owned by people in Ontario for people in Ontario. with a democratic vote on all key decisions. These are pieces we can start baking into the other processes, just as we're focusing on charity and nonprofit and employee ownership. Let's make sure that we're advancing this important issue as well.
Sean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, it's so important for all of us to be co-op champions and help people understand, raise awareness about the co-op model. We all need to be advocates. Um, and I think just that idea of, there's so many people, we're so frustrated and we feel so powerless sometimes with everything that's going on. So understanding that co-ops can be a mechanism to kind of uh, regain some of that power, right? And make a direct impact economically, socially, culturally, environmentally in our communities. I think that's a really powerful idea. So thank you so much for that. And I'm just dropping in the chat a document that OCA offers, free document, some common co-op myths and how to address them, and also a list of co-ops in Ontario. So everyone can feel free to have a look at those. So I think it's 1:05. So we've had a great conversation. So I'd like to open it up at this point to our audience and see if we have any questions for Chris and Sean. Bharat, yes.
Yeah, hi, Michelle. Yeah, hi, everyone. So, Chris and Sean, you really, very great, the discussion, conversation. I mean, learned a lot from this session. And Chris, you touched upon it, and also Sean, you mentioned about this that raising, say, finance for business, right? It's a very critical operation. And then Chris was mentioning that, like SolarShare has to approach financial institutions, banks for raising capital from them. That's one way. But what I was just thinking was oh, just give me one minute. Okay, yeah. So what thinking was regarding raising capital from institutions which are cooperatively minded, like say in Ontario we have Meridian or say other credit unions. Well, so my question is that is it already happening? And if it's not happening, how can that be promoted so that basically birds of the same feather can flock together? So that sort of a thing. So that was my question. So yeah, okay, yeah, Chris, Sean, any one of you, please feel free to take it.
I can try a little bit. Thanks for that question. I think and I totally agree. One cooperation amongst cooperatives is one of the principles. I love that idea. Cooperation amongst cooperators seems like an elegant solution. So totally agreed with the alignment of cooperatives with and cooperative financial institutions with other cooperatives, like Sean was mentioning. Certainly our debt isn't from a cooperative, unfortunately, or cooperative financial institution. If I could take myself back in time, I would have tried harder to make that happen. I've been learning a lot over my journey over the last 10 years or so as a manager of a cooperative. And so, I think that's something that I wish I had done a better job of. Moving forward, certainly we've had chats with those, like, for instance, VCIB, Van City Community Investment Bank. They do this kind of work. They do financing around these kinds of projects around renewable energy specifically. And so that's for us at SolarShare something, we'd go down that path. But certainly we want to go and work with other organizations and support other organizations that are cooperative. And so whether it's a credit union or other cooperatives, that's where we're trying to spend our money, build our partnerships, receive financing for sure.
Our bank mortgage is with Van City Community Investment Bank, which is owned by Van City Credit Union, and they're wonderful. As Chris mentioned, not only do they do renewable energy, but financing, but they do just a ton of work around affordable housing in Ontario. So we're really fortunate to have Van City participating in the local affordable housing space. We also do our day-to-day banking with Kindred Credit Union, which they're one of the most values-driven and creative credit unions that you'll find. So they're really lovely. And part of our financing for our first property, we needed a bridge financing while we waited for some other stuff to kind of kick in. We received a $1.5 million bridge loan from the Canadian Cooperative Investment Fund. which I'm now on the board of, but is a $25 million fund that assembles capital from different big cooperatives and credit unions. So, Van City, the cooperators, Desjardins, others are putting in money, and then that's accessible to help co-ops, including new co-ops, growing co-ops, to access capital that sometimes is otherwise hard. So that's an example of co-ops really intentionally coming together and creating that infrastructure. In the case of the self-directed RSP program, that's an association, the Canadian Worker Co-op Federation, that created this tool to help worker co-ops access capital, but they opened it up to people like us as well. And so they created this, kind of movement infrastructure that they didn't have to, but they did. And they were able to do that because of a partnership with Concentric Trust, which itself is, I believe, still controlled by the credit union industry as well. So really relying on these different layers of infrastructure that have been created using, generations of effort from different cooperators at different point in history, layering these all together. We also received a loan from the Van City Community Foundation, which is funded using profits from Van City Credit Union. And so again, this is something that forward-thinking credit union members and directors, decades ago, decided that they wanted to create this other piece of social infrastructure that is now having an outsized impact on affordable housing and other issues across Canada, and filling equity gaps that we're seeing in our market. So I think that's the exciting piece for us here as cooperators in today's generation is, what is the infrastructure that we're going to create, as small as it may be during our time, that can grow and scale and become something that the next generation of cooperators can, benefit from and continue to grow.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I mean, it's a process, right? And I think we're always looking at the big picture, and we're co-ops as a general rule, we're not just thinking about, the next quarter, the next year. We're thinking long term, right? Present and future members, thinking about our communities, thinking about long-term sustainable success. John, you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, John.
The first question probably to Sean. Sean, we're all aware that Ontario and Canada as a whole are going through a housing crisis. Affordable homes, lack of homes, that type of thing. I'm wondering, is your organization involved, or are you interested in any of the incentives that the government is offering to build homes, to build these smaller homes, these tiny homes? Is your organization, would you be a candidate to champion some of that initiative?
Thanks for the question, John. Certainly, we benefit from the involvement of the federal government in housing. So our mortgage is insured by CMHC, which allows us to have longer mortgage amortization, better interest rates, and we don't have to guarantee it as directors ourselves, which is always a really critical criteria. None of us have that much to gain from our participation. It was always a core principle that no one should have to bet their family home on trying to help their community. So that program really helped us get there. Our new developments are benefiting from CMHC / Build Canada Homes programs as they roll out as well. That there's some really significant opportunities for financing through the federal government. For us, we're not doing tiny homes, but some of their prefab and modular housing work can help with apartment construction as well. So that is all an option. I think there's still opportunities for that to improve. There's some regulatory issues that both the federal government and the provincial government could tackle in order to support cooperative growth. But from a strictly housing perspective, a concrete example, the 25 acres that the city of Waterloo donated to this Habitat for Humanity-led partnership that will result in our organization getting 170 new apartments that we can rent to people with limited incomes. That was made possible by the Housing Accelerator Fund of the federal government that is making the city whole so that they can pay off existing debt on that land, pay for site servicing infrastructure and possibly education development charges. So it's a real collaboration between the federal government and the municipality, an example that, when governments work together and set big ambitions, that they can have equally big impacts.
Just a supplemental question, maybe to both of you. In terms of the member, if you're a member, then you have one vote on all the decisions. But what about like the tenants that live in your units? Are they actually a member too? And are they able to contribute or invest in that building or structure that you're providing to them?
Yeah, another great question, John. So there are nonprofit housing cooperatives in which 100% of the directors are residents in the building. Nonprofit housing co-ops are fantastic. They've had a hard time growing over the last number of years when government funding was really pulled back, although we're starting to see the sector do some like really impressive building and acquisition. So we're starting to see that change. When we started Union Cooperative, there was no government funding in a meaningful way to support the growth of nonprofit housing co-ops. So part of our idea was, can we learn from the SolarShares of the world and these other organizations and bring in the money that used to be provided by government so we can continue to grow. We do have one dedicated tenant member seat on our board, where that's probably not enough. And so when we started, we didn't have a building yet, so we kind of limited how we set up our board there. But it's something that we're certainly interested in returning to think about how do we increase both member involvement in cooperative decisions, but also tenant decision making as well. So that's the nice thing with co-ops too, is you're not going to get everything right on day one, but by it being member controlled, by it being mission driven, get started. We now have this asset, this building that's a great home for folks. We can make tweaks to the governance model with approval from the members and with interest from the tenants in order to continue to make it better. But I think sometimes folks wait to try and get the perfect system before they get started. And we wouldn't have bought this building if we had waited for that. So, always a good reminder for us that we can continue to do better, look for new ways to engage tenants, making sure that they can control their properties. But I think without getting too much into kind of nonprofit housing stuff, but there are some advantages in how we've structured it here. We are seeing some really cool models like the BC Community Land Trust, which is owned by the BC Cooperative Housing Federation. So they set up this new nonprofit. They now build the buildings, own the buildings, take care of it, but then they rent the whole building to a new nonprofit housing co-op. So the residents get to control all like resident matters. They select their neighbors, they organize events, things like that. But you have people who are experts at managing mortgages and funding agreements with the federal government, who are experts at HVAC systems. Like, most people don't want to have to learn a whole heck of a lot about HVAC systems. They want to control the really important things to them, like, what is my rent? Who are my neighbors? How are we using this space? Will I be able to live here as long as I want to? So the BC Co-op Housing Federation is experimenting with some different ways of trying to get the benefits of both worlds and continue to expand the co-op housing sector. We still have some exploration to do, but I think, a great example that the co-op model can be flexible. It can meet changing environments, and you're not going to get it right on day one, but keep trying, get started.
Thank you.
Excellent advice. That's really interesting about the BC Housing Federation, what they're doing there. That's really interesting. Chris, do you have anything to add about that? Like even in terms of, the role that your members play in your organization or transparency, accountability?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I really like what Sean said, and I think it's interesting. Like SolarShare is a slightly different story, where we were actually originally enabled. The structure of SolarShare was sort of enabled by the provincial government at the time, and saw fit to they saw the benefits of having renewable energy owned by the community, and so we've fit into this structure as that type of cooperative. And again, I don't want to go into too many details around that because it would get down into the weeds and a little complicated. But I think there are certainly ways, to John's point, about how we can engage with our members differently, and how we govern ourselves through our members. And so, for instance, I would love it if we could sell electricity directly to our members. And actually, one of the things we're doing is advocating for these regulatory changes in Ontario so that we can do something called community virtual net metering, where we can set up a solar project. We can sell that power to each of our members. Right now, we're not able to do that, but through that kind of mechanism, in a similar way to having the tenants of the buildings that Sean's working in have some control over where the project and how that all works, it would be a little bit more decentralized if we were able to do that kind of work. And so we're advocating that, which would change ideally the way that we interact with our members and how much influence our members have. So certainly, I like to preach continuous improvement. We're not at the end of our journey, certainly at SolarShare, where there's always ways in which we can improve the governance and improve how that works.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's a kind of another layer, right? So going beyond investing in a project that you believe in, I want to see more solar projects. I want to invest in SolarShare. But yeah, beyond that, to maybe having accessibility to solar energy personally and creating more of a connection.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there anything, we can do out there in the world to help with that, to help advocate for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been an interesting journey. We call it in the solar industry the solar coaster, because it's always up and down. But right now we're in an interesting spot. There's a lot of electricity that is going to be needed in Ontario over the next 20 years that we're going to have to build out. Solar is some of the most cost effective and fastest to deploy. So we are actively advocating for these kinds of policy changes at the government level, because electricity policy is regulated at the provincial or territorial level. So we're working on that. So what I do is say, sign up to our newsletter. You can go to our website, solarbonds.ca. You can sign up to our newsletter. We will certainly, over the next little while, be actively engaging with our members as we engage with other renewable energy cooperatives. Sean mentioned land trusts. We're working with other land trusts and other like-minded cooperatives, because we want to see more solar, more electrification of those assets. And so the way that you can help is by being involved with our community. And certainly, one of the things that's been really helpful is when we ask our members or folks who are part of our community to help reach out to their MPPs and their elected official, that combined voice can be extremely powerful. And so that in particular is a mechanism that I'd encourage you to consider. Join up to our newsletter. I think the same is true for other organizations that you want to support. When they ask for that kind of outreach to government, that can be really, 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 really impactful. And I love it because it has that, it's one person, one vote kind of democratic approach, and we can make our voices heard together, and that, the politicians pay attention to that.
Great advice. Thanks, Chris. We do have one more question I think we have time for before we go, from Edward. So Edward says, a lot of thanks to the discussants for good information shared here. Are there opportunities for individuals with passion for cooperatives to learn more, either as interns, volunteers, or as employment opportunities in future? I'll give that to either one of you. Chris, yeah?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd say, the OCA is a really great play. There's other organizations like the OCA that have information more about cooperatives. Specifically, so you're interested in learning opportunities, I think those exist, and I think the OCA can probably point you towards those. In terms of getting involved, you can certainly reach out to us, and when we have volunteer opportunities, we certainly appreciate our members who wish to volunteer. So there may be opportunities coming up to help us with things like that. In terms of internships and stuff, we typically take advantage of Canadian government grants for, like, for instance, Canadian summer jobs, that kind of thing. So, there's Venture for Canada is another one. So if you can get involved with one of those, that's typically how we get folks with short-term employment or learning employment. Propel Impact is another one we've used, where they have a process where they have younger folks who have gone through school want to be deployed to these various impact kind of organizations, and so we work with those kinds of organizations too. So I'd look up, that's generally how we at SolarShare do it. And certainly we're a small shop too, but every once in a while, we are looking for folks to join our team. So I think the best way to figure that out is by going to our newsletter.
Great. Sean, do you have anything to add?
We're an even smaller team than Chris. It's just me. Uh, so unfortunately, nothing directly, but there are things like Cooperatives First, which is a training program about cooperative governance and how co-ops work, how to start a co-op. That's offered by an organization called Cooperatives First out west. So they're a great resource if you really want to go deep. There's a university program on co-ops. It's not Dalhousie, it is St. Mary's. St. Mary's University has their co-op program. But I'll say just you can take a look at the Ontario Co-op Association website to see what co-ops are in your area or which ones are working in a space that you may be able to engage with remotely. Michelle posted Co-op Zone in the chat. That's another great resource for co-ops. There are online co-ops as well. So depending on your skill set, you can check out platform cooperatives where they're trying to build tools, internet tools that are owned cooperatively. So lots of different options, depending on kind of your focus area. I think, the co-op is a legal form, it's a movement, but then within there's so many different specialty areas. And if I asked to intern at Gailey, they rightfully say no, because I have no useful skills for them. But maybe that's your background, you're an agricultural expert or food processing, and that may be a better fit, or something else. There are graphic design co-ops and accounting co-ops. There's all sorts of different options depending on what's the right fit.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sean. Yeah, I mean that's the beautiful thing about co-ops, right? They're really every size, every industry. There's online cooperatives, in person. There's co-ops in every single community. Yeah, I posted a choose co-op list on here, so that gives you kind of a list in Ontario. I've just added a couple more websites in the chat. Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada has a great list of co-ops, some great resources, job postings. OCA has job postings sometimes. And I would say, yeah, like reach out. If there's a co-op you're interested in, reach out to them. Ask questions, get to know them, see what kind of opportunities exist. I mean, co-ops is just a wonderful sector, and so willing to share information, so generous. That's one of my favorite things about working in this sector, and why you'll have to drag me kicking and screaming out of here, because it is just such a um, like a close-knit, I think, community, and such a welcoming one as well. And we have webinars and other opportunities. We have an in-person event coming up in October in Mississauga. Everyone is welcome. So we're always looking to share information and welcome new folks into the co-op sector. And okay, so that's fantastic. If there's no more questions, I'll just throw it out there one last. Okay, we're just about out of time. Okay, so it looks like we're good. So I will just share my screen one more time just so I can say thank you so much. So we If you want to learn more, again, I dropped these links in the chat, but if you want to learn more about SolarShare, about Union, or about us at OCA, here's the websites. I'll also share this PowerPoint and the transcript and recording with everyone here today, and then you can find the recording on our YouTube channel as well afterwards. And thank you again to everyone. If you want to learn more about other ethical investing opportunities, there are a few other co-ops out there right now. La Siembra or Camino brand, you might recognize that. Coffee, cocoa, chocolate, things like that in the grocery store. They do offer preferred shares and debentures opportunities, so you can check them out. Check out our Choose Cooperative listing. And also, if you're a member of a credit union, often credit unions offer investment shares to raise capital as well. Lots of opportunities out there to invest in your community. And again, before we leave, a huge, huge thank you to Sean and Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today, for being part of this, for sharing all this amazing information, helping us understand a little bit more, how we can use our money in ways that align with our values and how we can support and empower our own communities and bring about the changes that we want to see. So thank you both so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. And then I'll just close off. This is our event coming up in October, the Co-op Success Roundtable. And actually, Sean will be there as one of our guests leading a session. And really, we're going to talk about ways how we can work together as a sector to create, again, that change we want to see, how we can grow and build the sector and overcome some of the barriers that we face collectively right now. So thank you again.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.